The concept of God's omniscience, or all-knowing nature, is a central belief in many religious traditions, particularly in monotheistic religions like Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. The idea that God possesses complete and perfect knowledge is deeply rooted in these faiths, and the vast majority of biblical verses reflect this perspective. However, there are verses that clearly demonstrate the exact opposite, namely, that God is not omniscient. On examining these scriptures, the faithful are left grappling with the glaring contradiction to the bedrock of the nature of God. In this presentation, I am neither affirming nor dismissing the omniscience of God. I am simply pointing out the verses that most use to refute the idea that God is all-knowing. You will make your own conclusions. I would like to see your views on how to debunk these assertions in the comments. These are scriptures that people struggle with, and it would be great to have some clarity about them. 1. Genesis 6 verse 6, NIV, "The Lord regretted that he had made human beings on the earth, and his heart was deeply troubled." In this verse, God expresses regret for having made humans. Regret implies a lack of future knowledge, since one only regrets an action if it produces results that they were not aiming for. In other words, God had no knowledge of what the creation of humans would turn out to be, specifically that humans would go against his desires for them, leading to regret and a deeply troubled heart. 2. Genesis 22 verses 1 to 19, NIV. Sometime later God tested Abraham. He said to him, "Abraham." "Here I am," he replied. Then God said, "Take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you." We all know how this went. Right before Abraham sacrificed his only son, Isaac, God commanded him to stop, as seen in the following scripture. 12. "Do not lay a hand on the boy," he said. "Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son." People point to the phrase, "Now I know that you fear God because you have not withheld your son from me," saying this is clear proof that Yahweh is not all-knowing. The phrase, "Now I know," is taken to mean that God had no knowledge of how far Abraham was willing to go prior to him raising his dagger to sacrifice his son. Right after this, God proceeds to make all sorts of lofty promises to Abraham. In other words, God was willing to grant Abraham these blessings provided he loved God to the point of letting go of his only son. If God knew what was in Abraham's heart, he would have given him these blessings without testing him. 3. Genesis 18. Genesis 18 covers the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. The first indication of God's lack of omniscience is seen in Genesis 18 verse 20 and 21. It says, "Then the Lord said, The outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great and their sin so grievous, that I will go down and see if what they have done is as bad as the outcry that has reached me. If not, I will know." These scriptures indicate first of all, that God needed an outcry to reach him, for him to know the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah. Secondly, even with the outcry reaching him, he did not know to what extent the sin had gone, and that he needed to go down and see. In other words, he had no prior knowledge of the sin of Sodom and needed what you might call a report to reach him. Furthermore, he needed to go down to see to what extent the report was true. This lack of all knowledge is further demonstrated when God, through his angels, negotiates with Abraham regarding the sparing of the cities if some righteous individuals could be found within their walls. If God knew that there were not enough righteous people in the offending cities for him to withhold his vengeance, he would have gone right ahead and meted out his punishment without this discussion. To recap, God did not know that Sodom and Gomorrah were drenched in sin, and it took a report reaching him for him to become aware. God did not know to what extent the reports were true and had to go down to the cities to verify. God did not know how many people, if any, were righteous in Sodom and Gomorrah. This presentation is not conclusive, and there are many more verses in the Bible that could be used to argue against the idea that God knows everything past, present, and future. I would like to know how you would debunk this interpretation of these verses. Please leave a comment and help a doubting